Hello everybody, I'm that one Argentinian gamer, and as you can guess from the title, we're tackling Dead Cells. Let me go out of my way and say that this game is fantastic. Metacritic says so it must be true. Jokes aside, it actually is. But there is one problem. This game is hard. Like, real hard. To give you an idea, it took me 12 hours plus 35 deaths to be able to beat it the first time, and almost 60 hours and 123 deaths in hard mode, and 95 hours and 153 deaths in very hard. And I'm kinda stuck there, I cannot beat expert mode yet. It's another one of those games where unlocks aren't 100% essential and you can beat it with your first ever run. In fact, I did. If you wanna watch how I beat the game on a fresh save file, check the card on top or the link in the description. Just a heads up, I'm not going to dive into my personal favorite builds. Since this game is based on RNG and unlocks, the perfect build isn't always achievable. That being said, let me know if you want me to talk about that in a future video. And after that level of commitment and being told by the game to get good, let me give you 10 tips on how to make your way through its keepers a bit better.
Number 1.
Being aggressive pays off. Playing safe, as Todd Howard would say, it just works. But being relentless is a viable option as well. In fact, it is rewarded with a speed boost, a boost that will activate after killing 8 enemies in quick successions. It increases your movement speed by 50% for 10 seconds, and it is refreshed after killing an enemy. In addition, this boost won't go away after getting hit. And there are multiple instances in which having this boost is beneficial. Like for example, the mutation combo increases your damage for 8 seconds after killing an enemy. The boost doesn't affect it directly, however it helps with reaching enemies faster, and thus keeping the bonus active. The mutation frenzy gives you a very small percentage of your health back when you hit enemies with melee attacks, but only when the speed boost is active. And by very small, I mean a base of 0.0012% per melee damage dealt. I reiterate the word melee since I've made the mistake of trying this with ranged weapons. And lastly, the Swift Sword deals critical damage when the boost is active, which synergizes greatly with the mutation velocity. This mutation makes the boost last for 30 seconds instead. You get this blueprint by beating the Timekeeper 5 times. And let me tell ya, I use this a whole bunch since I love going fast in this game. It's undeniable that it all comes down to knowing your surroundings and learning the enemy's behavior, but be aggressive and you'll get far in the game.
Number 2.
You can recover some health right after taking damage by hitting enemies. Ever notice that orange part on your health bar? It's hard to tell at first, but when you get hit, some of your lost health becomes orange and it quickly goes down. When you hit enemies, a small portion of it is regenerated based on the damage you deal. This mechanic is known as recovery, where you can regain that health back by kicking a dude. This orange health, however, does go down rather quickly, and you only recover 12% of the damage you inflict to enemies. So, on top of having a very small window to recover, you also need to be able to hit hard enough to benefit from it. Check out this example. I lose a big chunk of my health and I'm trying my hardest to find something to hit to recover as much health as possible. My mushroom boy kills it before I take a swing at it and makes me lose my only chance to recover any health. And yes, you heard that right. You only recover your health back from your attacks, not from your skills. One temporary solution is to equip the mutation recovery, where it triples the time it takes for the orange health to deplete. Unfortunately, you need to be conjunctivious 5 times in order to unlock it. It is also worth mentioning that no recoverable health will occur from the temporary bonus health gained from the tonic.
Number 3.
Take your time on every stage. I know I said that being aggressive pays off, which is true, but exploring is far more fruitful than speeding through stages since killing enemies give you more cells and gold, and checking every nook and cranny pays off rather handsomely. By exploring thoroughly, you can find scrolls, which are fundamental to become stronger, enemies that drop cells, gold, and sometimes more scrolls and blueprints, and stores and chests that give you more options that can make the difference between a successful run and dying on the first stage. Explore, kill enemies, and gather as many resources as you can. After all, it's not like you have a time limit, and the rewards behind the timed doors aren't always worth it. Unless you're in the Forgotten Sepulchre, where staying too long in the darkness will end up killing you, there is no urgency to explore and gather resources.
Number 4.
Avoid heavy melee weapons. Before losing credibility, please hear me out on this one. I know everybody has their preferences. Hell, I prefer slow but heavy hitting weapons or characters in beat 'em ups. But wow, even after 100 hours of playing this, I can't recommend them. First off, the first swing from these weapons takes so long, most enemies have the advantage by default. Although that is if you decide to attack first. The only options are letting the enemy attack first and parrying their attack, which sometimes you aren't able to because some of these take both weapon slots, locking them in place or rolling around them. The other problem is that they don't deal enough damage to compensate for how slow they are. Later on, it becomes harder to find enemies that die in 1 or 2 hits. Typical for red colored melee weapons that generally have lower DPS than the green ones, but since they're way faster, you will usually hit the enemies before they do, thus having the advantage. And as for boss fights, you might as well call this harder mode. You can't reliably deal constant damage as you're forced to play the mind game and let them attack first. And even then, they can perform some combos that won't leave much wiggle room for damage. To make matters worse, some bosses can't be stunned by parrying, so you're stuck in this never-ending story of parrying, dodging, and trying to hit the enemies while they swing back. Now, I realize that heavy weapons are slow-paced but powerful, and you might say that a fully upgraded heavy weapon sounds like a no-brainer, but you will run into a point where it's just not enough. You'll end up spending more time trying to hit moving enemies that can dodge and jump around. Like, look at this case, please, just look at it, look, I can't hit it! Besides, it's not like you can deal a lot of damage rapidly otherwise. There are multiple occasions where you can hit hard and quickly using red or purple weapons. My suggestion is to stick to the faster weapons. And the ice crossbow. And the repeater crossbow. Those are fun.
Number 5.
Prioritize extra damage over extra health. Having more health sounds great on paper, but it won't matter much if you take forever to take down enemies. After all, the quicker you kill them, the less damage you take back, right? You can do this by picking your main color, boosting it every chance you get, and adding 15% of cumulative extra damage with each level. I can already hear some of you saying that 15% doesn't sound like much, but it stacks quite favorably the further you go, and you want to keep it that way. Bear in mind that this is not always possible, as there are scrolls that give you 2 color options that might not have the one you prioritized. Thankfully, the game has dual color equipment that scales with the higher of the 2 stats. The only time I suggest otherwise is when your entire set depends on one color and you have no plans to change it later. Like in this example. In that case, pick the color that gives you the most health, as there's no real benefit from picking the highest of the 2. And sure, you could argue that the health boost is way higher than the mere 15% of extra damage at first, but the difference here is that the damage boost is always 15% per point. Health, on the other hand, goes lower and lower the more points you spend on the same color. Stick to powering up the color of your main weapon and it'll go a long way.
Number 6.
Pay attention to your equipment and their affixes. It can be a little overwhelming the further you go, but knowing what your equipment can do by default while paying attention to those extra affixes can make a substantial difference, such as killing bosses in a matter of seconds. Just in case you're not aware, affixes are modifiers applied to your equipment. The higher the level and quality of your gear, the more affixes they receive, as well as being stronger. Some of these will increase the damage output depending on the status effect applied to enemies, which many weapons can do by default. Some others will cause a status effect to spread across enemies when killed, and some others will shoot arrows or drop bombs when you use them. In my humble opinion, those blow. except maybe for slow hitting weapons. While higher numbers are tempting and having a slew of these sounds like a good idea, it'll be worthless if you can't even trigger them in the first place. Pay extra attention before switching, reroll your equipment whenever you need to and you're able to, and you'll blast through enemies with far more ease.
Number 7.
Don't underestimate the power of 2 deployable skills that can deal constant damage. Grenades are great for high damage as well as keeping enemies in place, and some powers give you so many opportunities. But how about having 2 deployables constantly dealing damage? Well, sometimes that is all you need to beat the game. From situations where there are multiple enemies that you can't be bothered to deal with all at once, to beating bosses in a matter of seconds, having 2 deployable turrets, especially when they pierce enemies, is really good. I'm not joking when I say doing this made me beat the game for the first time ever, despite never having faced the Timekeeper and the final boss before. They didn't stand a chance. Having 2 deployables that damage enemies constantly will greatly help you to beat the game. The moment you're not sure about a situation, the moment you pop those 2 together in a bloodbath party. Keep in mind that some of these are powered by the player, meaning that you need to be reasonably close to them to function at all. The deployables that do this are the Barnacle, the Cleaver, the Crusher, the Double Crossbow-matic, the Flamethrower Turret, the Heavy Turret, the Sinew Slicer, the Tesla Coil, and the Scavenged Bombard. Not that you need to memorize it, you'll notice that when you deploy one of these, they have a semi-transparent line of electricity indicating it's powered by the player.
Number 8.
Use the ground stomp whenever possible. I don't know about you, but I use this maneuver all the time, mainly every time I jump down a platform just to speed up the process of descending. And more often than not, I land on enemies causing damage in the process. Fun times! Not only is effective for speedruns when you realize you can cancel it in midair by rolling, but with enough height, usually a tad higher than your double jump, landing a ground stomp near enemies will both stun them and cause damage, sometimes even kill them straight away. It also has a bit of a knockback. Not much, mind you, but if an enemy happens to be close enough to a ledge, it'll push them away to their inevitable demise. In case you don't know, holding down and pressing the jump button while in midair will cause you to dive down and smash the ground. The higher you perform this from, the more damage you deal. The downside, get it? Is that in later stages, usually where there are spikes or puddles of poison, this can result in taking damage by accident. It's not the most recurring thing in the game, but there's still a chance. In these cases, I try my best to look as far down as the game allows me to spot hazardous threats. In case you didn't know, you can move the camera a little bit with the right analog stick or with Ijical on the keyboard. It also breaks doors if you land close enough to them, which by proxy can also stun enemies near it. Which brings us to the next topic.
Number 9.
Break doors by rolling into them. As previously stated, breaking closed doors when there are enemies behind them will stun them. With that in mind, there are 3 ways to break doors open: with your weapon, ground smashing, and rolling. Rolling is the better option of these 3 because it moves you closer to the stunned enemy. Both ground smashing and using your weapon in front of a door will cut your momentum entirely. And since enemies cannot see through closed doors but you can, it only makes sense to take advantage of the situation and get an easy kill, right? Actually, there are 4 enemies that can and will attack you through walls: the Grenadier, the Bombardier, the Inquisitor, and the Lancer. The trickiest one being the latter, because he can also attack vertically through platforms. There's also a skill called Emergency Door that allows you to deploy a door anywhere you want, behaving the same way as a regular one. You can open it normally or break it apart. Not the most useful skill, but you know, it's there if you're so inclined to use this strategy.
Number 10.
Learn to parry. A tricky maneuver, I know, but it turns out that being able to completely negate incoming damage and stun your enemies in the process is a game changer. While having 2 different weapons allows for multiple combinations, it's undeniable that some enemies will eventually attack you before being able to stun them or kill them. And while rolling through attacks is more than viable, some enemies perform combos. Combos that will mess you up if you're not careful. With a shield equipped, pressing the button assigned to it will make your character swing it in an attempt to to parry. When done successfully on melee attacks, enemies get stunned for about a second. As for projectiles, they'll go flying back to the swords, and bombs will bounce to the direction you're facing, as well as making them harmless to you. On top of that, when successfully parrying an attack, you can instantly parry again. Usually when you parry nothing, there's a little more than a half-second cooldown before you can parry again. Since the game gives you spider senses by default, every time an enemy is about to attack, a yellow exclamation mark will briefly pop up on top of them. Not only does it tell you when the enemy is about to attack, but also when to use your shield. The moment you see it, the moment you pop your shield. Some enemies have a short but noticeable wind-up animation, some others attack you in a fraction of a second. If you don't feel like equipping a shield in your secondary weapon slot, you can use the mutation Armadillo Pack, which allows you to parry attacks while rolling by having a shield equipped in your backpack. Sadly, you'll have to be lucky enough to have a Thorny drop the blueprint and have unlocked the backpack by unlocking 15 items in the first place, so this will only be applicable for later in the game. You could brute force your way into learning when exactly to parry. You could also go to the training room once unlocked and summon the monster you want to train parrying with. But if you want to get serious, you can try beating the game by only having a shield equipped. I know it sounds ridiculous, but please hear me out on this one. Did you know it's possible to beat the game with just shields? Yeah! Granted, it's not the easiest feat to accomplish. It requires a lot of memorization and patience, especially since some enemies and bosses have attacks that can't be parried at all. While unorthodox, it helps immensely at getting used to parrying. I totally recommend you try this. Practice as much as you need until you master it, especially in harder difficulties. It truly is a game changer. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I hope you find this helpful. Let me know in the comments what you think, like the video if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more in the future. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.